presented by Ram, continues on ABC Action News Now.
Well, welcome back, T. Corn, along with John Sable, as we get into our fantasy part of the program, and our good friend Matt McGuire.
Yes, Matt will have all the updates in the fantasy league and seeing who you can drop, who you can pick up, and who to look out for in the waiver wire heading into next week. Hey, Matt.
Hey, John. Hey, Tom. How you guys doing? Yeah, we're going to talk about the waiver wire. You know, we're going to talk about trade deadline. That's something that's approaching in fantasy football leagues. And we'll talk about a couple key injuries. The biggest injury being Arian Foster, the running back for the Houston Texans. He tore his ACL. He's obviously going to be done for the rest of the season. That puts Alfred Blue back in the spotlight back there in Houston. Now, Blue was the actual starting running back the first couple of the weeks when Foster was out. And he wasn't that effective. He had a huge game against the Bucs in Week 3, but other than that, didn't really get a whole lot going. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans brought in a free agent and went by some sort of running back by committee down there. So I don't really like Alfred Blue as a pickup this week, although a lot of people are adding him. A running back that I do like, though, is Darren McFadden, the running back for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, coming out of the bye week, there was a lot of talk out of Dallas that they were going to make a change at the running back position. A lot of people thought it was going to be Christine Michael, myself included. But it ended up being Darren McFadden, and he had a huge week. He had 29 carries, 152 yards, and a touchdown. That was more rushing yards in one game than he had the previous 5. So I really do think that McFadden is going to be the guy going forward for the Cowboys, and he's only owned in about 35% of the leagues out there. The next guy on the waiver wire that I think you might want to add is Jordan Reed. Now, Bucs fans are familiar with Reed. He's the tight end for the Washington Redskins. He had 11 catches for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns yesterday, including that game-winning touchdown. Now, Reed is somebody that I mentioned back in Week 1 on the plank as somebody that you might want to keep an eye on if he can stay healthy. Now, he missed 2 games due to injury, so he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But when Jordan Reed is on the field, he's actually leading the NFL in targets from the tight end position. He's available in 50% of the leagues, so if he's out there in your league and you need help at tight end, you're definitely going to want to add Jordan Reed. Now let's talk about that trade deadline in fantasy football. We're a little segment I'm going to call Buy Low, Sell High. These are guys who are maybe a little bit undervalued, maybe they're a little bit disappointing so far in the season that you might be able to get good value on trade. The first one is Eddie Lacy for the Green Bay Packers. Now, he's probably been the biggest disappointment for fantasy football fans this season. Coming into the year, he was definitely a top 5 pick in most drafts, but he's only averaged about 40 yards a game and has only scored 1 touchdown. The Packers were on bye this week, so I look for them to get redirected after the bye week and Eddie Lacy start to break out and have some good games. But another reason, and a bigger reason why I like Eddie Lacy, is if you look at his production last season, once we got into November and December, his production just skyrocketed. You know, I don't know if it's the cold weather up there in Lambeau and Green Bay where it makes him play better, or, you know, he is a big physical running back. Maybe those defenses just have a hard time tackling him in the cold weather. But whatever it is, if you look at November on last season, he averaged 111 yards a game and he scored 9 touchdowns. So if you need help at running back, you might want to consider making a trade for Eddie Lacy in your league. A guy who I think that you should maybe sell high on is Lamar Miller, the running back for the Miami Dolphins. Now, if you have him on your team, you've stuck out for 4 pretty bad weeks early on in the season, but you've really enjoyed 2 great weeks back-to-back. The Dolphins had a change at the head coach position, and Lamar Miller has really benefited from that. He had a huge week last week. He had 175 yards rushing. He had about another 60 yards receiving, had one of the highest point totals of anybody so far this week or this year in fantasy football. So I do think he'll be productive going forward, but I also think his value is at its peak. So if you have Lamar Miller on your team, he might be somebody you want to look to trade. So that's all I've got this week for the Ram Fantasy Football Tailgate. Back to the studio to you guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, Matt. That was cool. Yeah, he always has great insight. Lamar Miller, keep him in mind.
Lamar Miller gave me almost 43 points yesterday, so I like that.
That's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, about time.
And I'll tell you what else is coming up. It is the time to walk the plank. And who's going to walk the plank this week? Oh, I think we all know who that's going to be, don't you?
Yeah, it's your buddy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back with more right after this.